Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the wonderful people across this great state who are working so hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, I've had a lot of kind of deep reflection recently, and it's because, there are two reasons. One is I've been writing more, as you well know, about how where does coastal Mississippi go from here? We're approaching the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and our story now is not one of just being a survivor. We've rebuilt this economic engine that is coastal Mississippi. The question is, where do we go from here? Been writing a lot more about it. Another column will get posted, and probably today, for a matter of fact, and you can read it at SuperTalk.fm. The other reason that I've been reflecting is that after Hurricane Katrina, as the publisher of the Sun Herald, one of the things I wanted to do is capture the lessons that I'm learning. I saw so many amazing lessons about the power of the human spirit and what happens when we come together, what happens when what the true character of Mississippi is revealed through something like a disaster. And I've been really urged by my wife, who knew that I had collected these lessons, to finish the book. And so what I'll be doing is I'm working toward publishing. We're talking to a publisher now, but working toward a book of lessons. It's 20 lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina on the 20th anniversary. And it's been terrific reflection for me. And boy, when you see it, when you look at all 20 lessons together, and I'll be sharing some on the store on this show in the near future. Man, it's powerful. We learn so much about ourselves, and I think the basis for the book is simply this: that it shouldn't take something like Hurricane Katrina to remind us to smell the roses and love our family and build a better community and dream bigger and all those things. That's the essence of the book, that in our everyday lives, to live a better life, we should always be focused on these things. So a lot of good reflection as it relates to that. One of the beauties of this show is I get the opportunity to talk to leaders in our not just in our state, but in our nation. And today I'm really thrilled to have someone I've been looking forward to getting to know, Congressman Michael Guest. Yeah, you've heard him many times here on Super Talk from the 3rd District of Mississippi, and we're gonna kind of retrace his story a little bit. But this is his first appearance on the Ricky Matthews Show, and I'm really surprised by that because he's been such a phenomenal leader, not just in our state but in our nation, and I'm really privileged to have him today. Michael, how you doing, my friend?
Man, I'm doing great, Ricky. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, listen, we got a chance to chat a little bit before the show started, but man, it's pretty dynamic up in Washington these days, isn't it?
It is, breath of fresh air when President Trump, not only even before he was sworn in, when we knew in November after the election results that not only would he be our president, but that Republicans were going to be able to retain control of the House and regain control of the Senate. We, as Republicans, as conservatives, were extremely excited, and that excitement continues. We see the president is doing great things every day. He's moving things forward. And I tell you, I'm excited every day, Ricky, to get to wake up and come to work and represent the people of our great state, but to be able to do so in a majority where we can make a true difference and the long-term outcome of where this nation or where this nation will be headed going forward.
Listen, when I was in New Orleans as the publisher of the Times-Picayune and president of NOLA Media Group, I was able to watch Mike Johnson. What a turn of events for him to become speaker. Did you have a good relationship before he became speaker?
I did. Knew Mike. Mike came in right before I did, and so as far as our seniority, he was just a year ahead of me. Mike was also someone who would often lead the charge as we were taking issues and appealing those issues through the court system. Mike has a great legal background in constitutional law, and so I would often sign off on amicus briefs and things of that nature that Mike would be circulating to members of Congress. But look, Mike was always an incredible leader. He was one of those individuals who was a man of great faith. He is not scared to talk about his faith. He will often, whether he's talking to groups, he will mention his relationship with Christ. He will talk about what he thinks are doors that God has opened to put him here. You know, he was a very unlikely choice to be our speaker. When McCarthy was removed from office, of course, Steve Scalise, also from our neighboring state of Louisiana, you know, he was the one viewed most likely to be able to succeed McCarthy when it was clear he would not be able to get the votes necessary. The next person in line was Jim Jordan, also a great conservative, a good friend from Ohio. Jim was unable to cobble together the votes needed. There it looked potentially like Tom Emmer, the whip from Minnesota, was kind of third in line. He was unable to get the votes necessary. And so, you know, Mike kind of rose out of a group that really was unexpected. But I'll tell you that I think he has done a phenomenal job leading this conference. You know, I have to remind people that we have the narrowest majority in the history of the House of Representatives. We are currently operating at a 2-seat majority. There were a couple of special elections this week, so that will move our numbers from 2 to 4. But Mike has done an incredible job of keeping this conference together and also making sure that we're moving President Trump's agenda forward. And so I think it is something that we can be proud of as Mississippians, knowing that a leader from our neighboring state of Louisiana is the third most powerful member, not just of Congress. He's the most powerful member of Congress, but he is third in line, or actually second in line after the vice president. If something were to happen to the president and vice president, the next person in line to be president would be the Speaker of the House. So truly, he has had an amazing rise here in Congress, and I'm proud to have the opportunity to serve under Mike Johnson.
You know, one of the, you know, I mentioned this book that I'm writing about Katrina lessons. And again, these lessons apply to everyday life. And one of the lessons is don't judge a book by its cover. And the basis of the lesson is simply this, that we go through life so fast that we are judging people on a very surface level, and we're just moving too fast through life. And one of the things that it teaches us to do is just to pause and look at who the essence of people are. And then, you know, in a difficult time, like after Katrina, leaders that you would have expected to step up, they did. And in many cases, maybe they even exceeded your expectation. But there are other leaders that stepped up, or who you expected to step up, who didn't. And again, we because we're making these surface observations about people and not really taking the time to understand the essence of who they are, we miss the mark sometimes. And what's interesting about Mike Johnson is, you know, you went through this litany of what it took to get him there, and we all watched that. But he's a man who's risen to the occasion. He seems to be uniquely gifted for this moment, doesn't he?
He does. You're exactly right. And you know, you talk about the busyness of life, and sometimes, you know, we don't have the opportunity to invest in individuals, to spend time with them like we would like to. And look, you know, I think to particularly people outside of Washington, D.C., outside of Louisiana, they didn't know who Mike Johnson was. They had not heard of him. Mike was not a member who sought out publicity. He was not trying to get on television shows on a nightly basis to promote his brand. He was someone who was working hard behind the scenes to be an effective legislator. And the members of Congress, we saw that, and we saw how hard he worked. We saw that he was not out trying to position himself or elevate himself, but because of the work he was doing, we said this is the type of person that we want to lead our conference. We want to lead our caucus. And I think that is the way that he's led. He's led with humility. He's led giving honor and praise first to his Heavenly Father and then to others. And so Mike, I will tell you, is an easy leader to follow. And he's someone who, as much as possible, wants the body to weigh in on these difficult decisions. He doesn't want to lead from the top. He wants the leadership to be from the bottom up. And so that has been a really, truly a breath of fresh air to have the opportunity to serve under Mike's leadership.
Yeah, you mentioned Steve Scalise. I had the opportunity to work with Steve when I was in Louisiana, and we had a really good relationship. I think about what he has gone through, man, from the shooting to his illness and the resiliency that he has shown and his willingness to continue to give his leadership during some tough moments in his life. I mean, it's an extraordinary story. Well, I tell you what we'll do, because we're coming to the end of this segment. We'll pick it up with Steve on the other side, and then we're going to actually stop for a second and take a step back. I want to take you back to Brandon, and a bit about your path, so people who don't know you can get to know you better. But we're visiting with Representative Michael Guest. He's from the 3rd District of Mississippi, and someone I think you're going to enjoy getting to know better if you don't know him already. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Congressman Michael Guest from the 3rd District of Mississippi. And when we went to the break, actually, we were just kind of generally talking about things in general. We talked about Mike Johnson. We mentioned Steve Scalise. I want to give the congressman an opportunity to respond to that point about Steve Scalise. But then we're going to actually take a step back and go back to where he grew up in Brandon. But real quick about Steve Scalise, boy, does he not define resilience?
He does. A great leader who loves his country. You talk about, the things that he has been through, first the shooting on the baseball field several years ago. Every year there is a charitable baseball game in D.C., the congressional baseball game where the Democrats play the Republicans. All the money raised goes to charity. And so the Republicans were practicing one morning before the game. And if you recall, a shooter was able to identify and found out where the Republicans were practicing, went there to the field, opened up, firing on the Republican members who were out there practicing that morning. Ultimately, he was engaged by Capitol Police and killed there. But before he was killed, Steve Scalise was injured, and it was a serious injury, an injury that he battled for years to recover. Spent an extended stay in the hospital, was away from D.C. When he returned, originally he was walking with a cane, had difficulty regaining some of his movements back, but he fought through and battled that. And then we know about a year and a half ago, he announced that he was also battling cancer. And so, Steve is a man who has a young family. He has children who are still in high school. But because of his love of country, love of his home state, Louisiana, he continues to battle through those things and has led this conference well. He and Mike Johnson, again, both from Louisiana, have done an incredible job. And we're blessed to have someone of his courage, someone of his resiliency, in Washington, D.C., continuing to move our agenda forward.
Well, listen, Michael Guest, you grew up in Brandon. You're a lifelong resident of Brandon. You love that area. You love Mississippi. When did you know you wanted to get into law? Take me back to where some of those early inspirations came from.
You're right. A proud Brandon Bulldog. Graduated from Brandon High School way back 1988. It seems like forever ago now. And then, my educational path from there was first through Mississippi State. I grew up in a Mississippi State household. Both my parents graduated from Mississippi State University. And so when I graduated, it was just kind of expected, Ricky, that would be my next stop in life. And so I went to Mississippi State, enrolled in the accounting program because I had taken an accounting course in high school that I enjoyed. I anticipated at some point that I would be changing majors, not sure what, but that was, you got to put something down when you sign up. And so I said, well, I'm going to start in accounting and then see where it leads. But ultimately stayed through accounting, finished accounting. And my last year of school, the Christmas before I'm getting ready to graduate, my parents have a very real conversation with me. They sat down with me and they said, hey, you're going to be graduating in just a few months. What do you plan on doing with the rest of your life? And I'll tell you, that was never anything that I had really thought through. I knew I was going to finish high school. I knew I was going to go to college. But what life looked like after college, as a young 20-year-old man, I just hadn't taken the time to really look that far ahead. And so my parents encouraged me to continue my education either through grad school or law school. So I applied for law school, was accepted at Ole Miss, went to Ole Miss, completed my law degree there at Ole Miss. And in my last semester of law school, I returned home to Brandon, and I did an internship in the district attorney's office. The DA at that time was an individual by the name of John Kitchens. You may remember his name. He was kind of a famous DA there for Rankin, Madison County, most famous in the fact that he prosecuted Luke Woodham, the Pearl High School shooting. If you remember, in the late 90s, 97, we had a string of high school shootings across the country. Paducah, Kentucky was the first, then Pearl High School, and then Columbine, Colorado was kind of the last in that string. But John Kitchens was the DA who was responsible for prosecuting Luke Woodham. I'll tell you that when I got to work for John, really enjoyed my time in the DA's office. John would often come in on Monday mornings, and he would talk about over the weekend how he had been out riding with law enforcement or going on search warrants. And so as I was there a little while, I finally worked my way up to the point of asking John if I could do those things. And so I got to work very closely with law enforcement. When my internship ended, we had a lady in our office who was going to go out on maternity leave. She was pregnant, and so I asked if I could stay on part-time to kind of help keep her caseload up while I was studying for the bar, making sure that the paperwork was done. And while I couldn't go in the courtroom and try the cases, that I could make sure that the day-to-day work involving those cases was handled. And so he allowed me to do that. After I passed the bar, I then come back to John and tell him that I would like to seek full-time employment in the office. He gave me some news that was disappointing. He said, look, I'd like to have you, but I don't have a position for you. But I tell you, I didn't let that stop me. The next day I go back to John and I say, John, if I can find some funding, would you use that funding to create a job for me to work here? And he said, if you can find a way to self-fund your position, you've got a job. So I began, Ricky, my very brief lobbying career. I lobbied the local Rankin County Board of Supervisors to see if they would give some additional funding to the DA's office. And I was blessed in the fact that I went to church with two of the supervisors and the county administrator. And the other supervisors knew me from growing up in the community, and the fact that growing up, I worked for a while at the city of Brandon, Parks and Recs, cutting grass, lining baseball fields, picking up trash, those kind of types of jobs. I worked for the county one summer delivering Meals on Wheels to the shut-ins. And so I was known by the local county government officials as someone who was willing to do anything that was asked. And so I will tell you that I was successful, though only mildly successful, in the fact that they did increase the budget of the district attorney's office, but only by $24,000. So coming out of law school, I have an accounting degree, a law degree. I've passed the bar examination, and I'm offered a job making $24,000 a year when I had people who had graduated law school who were making many 4 times that. But I knew that this is what I wanted to do, that I wanted to be able to work in the DA's office, to serve my community, to work with law enforcement. So I took that job as an entry-level position, hoping it would lead to me being able to move into other positions within the DA's office, and was able to spend a dozen years there in the DA's office as either a staff attorney, assistant DA, deputy DA, before later running for district attorney. And was elected to serve 3 4-year terms as the DA for Madison and Rankin County. So roughly the first 25 years of my professional life was spent there in the DA's office, working with local law enforcement, and still have some great memories of some of the things that we were able to accomplish on behalf of the people that we serve.
You know what? I love that story. First of all, how industrious, how entrepreneurial of you to get started that way. I did not know that story. As a publisher, one of the first things I did wherever I was to get to know the local district attorney or local judges. I loved talking with youth court judges if there were such a position, because you learn a lot about what goes on in a community, what makes a community tick, the challenges of a community. That experience, all those multiple terms and that, getting started that way, what a great way to sort of lay a foundation to being a better congressman. I mean, I bet you draw on that constantly.
I mean, you're exactly right. From a lot of different aspects. I mean, the courtroom experience that I had, being able to question witnesses and go in the courtroom and argue cases, that equates to some of the oversight hearings where we're conducting examination of witnesses who will come before our committees. Having to be the person who prosecuted the laws that were written, it helps, I think, gives me a unique perspective as we're looking at drafting legislation from our office. How is this going to be put in place? I had to run an office, so I was used to being able to supervise individuals, to hire right people, to make sure that they're aware of their job descriptions, and then allow them that freedom and ability to perform those jobs. And look, I still have great relationships with those law enforcement officers, those judges, even a lot of the defense attorneys. Defense attorneys, while I would disagree with them in courtrooms and we would argue vigorously over the law and how the law should be applied, at the end of the day, in most cases, as long as those defense attorneys were above board, they weren't trying to do anything that I considered to be misleading a jury. We could fight like cats and dogs in the courtroom, and then we could walk out of that courtroom and still be friends. And so I think that is probably another trait that I was able to take to D.C. I can disagree, whether it be with my fellow Republicans on certain issues. I can disagree with members of the Democratic Party, but because we disagree on political issues, that doesn't mean we necessarily have to be enemies. Because, look, while we may disagree on this issue, we may need to come together on an issue in the future. And so I do think that background may have helped me with that characteristic.
I'm sure that it has. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Congressman Michael Guest from the 3rd District of Mississippi. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Congressman Michael Guest, who's from the 3rd District of Mississippi. He's a lifelong resident of Brandon, and someone I'm really enjoying getting to know better. We were talking about your time as a district attorney and being on the ground. What's interesting to me, and now that you got elected, and we don't have time to tell all that story because I want to really shift gears and start to think about Washington and what's happening these days. But as congressman, to bring to the table a support of local law enforcement. One of the most cherished shows I do is with police chiefs, and to learn how difficult it is to recruit people, and that patrolmen these days have to be lawyers and psychologists, and because we have these social issues in our society today, and so many issues that the patrolman ends up being sort of a triage of so many important issues. The thought, Michael, that we would be in a situation at one point in American history where policemen were under assault, and to some extent maybe they still are by certain sides. It's an amazing turn of events in this country, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought I would see the defund the police movement, that you would have groups out there who were wanting to not only cut the budget, but sometimes do away with law enforcement and create some sort of program more where social workers responded to these emergency situations than the men and women of law enforcement. I believe one of the things that makes our communities great places to live, worship, and raise a family is public safety. People want to live in places where they're safe. They want to live in places to where when they leave their house, they don't have to lock their doors. And so, that is so important. And to see our law enforcement come under attack on a national level, and some of the progressive ideas that we were seeing flowing out of Washington was amazing to me. And most of those now have been rejected. Those that have been tried, we see that in cities where they cut law enforcement budgets, where they let law enforcement officers go. They were surprised when they saw a rise in crime, when they saw more people commit crimes, where we see these liberal judges who are letting violent offenders out, people who commit crimes such as aggravated assault, rape, robbery, on little to no bond. They're surprised when they commit additional crimes, and that should not be surprising to anyone. I believe that our law enforcement is a segment of society that we often take for granted. We often want to complain if they give us a ticket because while we were speeding and we deserved that ticket, so was everybody else. But I consider our law enforcement to be our modern day heroes. And so I am excited to be able to come to Washington, D.C. And to advocate on those issues that are important to the men and women of law enforcement, because I feel just like the men and women who serve our military, those are the two highest callings that we can have as professions, people who truly sacrifice themselves, put themselves in harm's way every day to keep us safe.
Listen, what we alluded to this at the beginning of the show, but this freight train that is Donald Trump, what he's proving is that when you think about all that he has gone through to find himself in this moment, and what we've learned about him is his enormous capacity to overcome unbelievable adversity in order to get done what he needs to get done. And then you see the alignment with Elon Musk on Doge, and I've written about that. This is that one opportunity. I came from the corporate world. I was involved in major corporate change efforts, re-engineering efforts, major re-engineering efforts, certainly not on the scale of what's happening now in the federal government, but one of them involving the second largest newspaper company in America. And what I learned through that process is you can't go to where you want to go if you don't know where you are now. And watching Elon Musk and the president work through understanding just how messed up it is, just how cumbersome and corrupt and difficult these systems that have been piled on each other and snowballed over all these years with no real attempt to undo anything. What they're discovering about the current situation is shocking. And man, this is our one good chance to get this right, isn't it?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan, I mean, we have heard our presidents talk about, hey, we need to shrink the size and the scope of government. And we've been unable to do that. Every year, it seems like government has grown. And as government has grown, we have seen waste, fraud, and abuse. A lot of that is being uncovered by Elon Musk, by the individuals who are working at his and the president's direction. And we're seeing program after program of money that is being misspent. And the way that they're able to get to this information is they're able to get to the hard data and pull that information out. The members that we request as members of Congress, we're given huge stacks of data. We're unable to really decipher through a lot of that. I think that's done intentionally because they don't want Congress to have oversight of many of these agencies. But the president has come in and he's done something that we've all hoped and wished somebody would do before. But he's actually been able to do that. And so you look at what he's done with shrinking the size and scope of government, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. And look, I've got to say the president has done an amazing job of securing our southwest border. We just got numbers out for the month of March. For the entire southwest border, for a month, there were only 7,200 encounters. Just to tell you how rare that was, we had a witness who testified last week before the Homeland Security Committee, a Border Patrol officer who testified that in 2021, in a single sector, and there are 9 sectors along the southwest border, in a single sector, the Del Rio sector, in one day, they had 10,000 immigrants in one day in one of the 9 sectors. And now we've seen this president, by declaring a national emergency, sending the resources that we need, stopping the catch and release programs, reinstituting Remain in Mexico, that those numbers have dropped dramatically. And at a time we heard the former president, President Biden, say, I'm doing the best job that I can. Secretary Mayorkas would come in before Congress and he would tell us at our hearings the border was secure, that we had operational control, when the numbers were saying a completely different story. And so this president is a president who gets things done. He's not going to take his time. He's not going to move into things slowly. This president, no, he has 4 years left in his presidency. He has 2 years that he's for sure to have a Republican majority in the House and Senate, and he's not going to waste a day. And that is so refreshing to have a president who was willing to say, look, I'm going to do what's best for the American people. I'm going to put the American people above politics. If it ruffles some feathers, at the end of the day, it's for the good of the country. And so I am honored to have the opportunity to serve during this historic time in our nation's history.
You look at this intersection we're at. I would describe there are multiple intersections, but the most important is where America goes from here. But what's intersecting in this crossroads that we're at? It's this incredible capacity that Trump has to lead. It is having people, innovators like Elon Musk and this group of innovators he's brought to the table. It's how lucky were we that this happens to be the moment where AI and advanced artificial intelligence is really beginning to reach a peak in a way that can be used technologically and innovatively to go into these old systems and find patterns and relationships. And I could just go on and on, but man, we're just lucky that all these moments are crossing at the same time. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and again, I just could go, Tom Homan, you talk, I mean, are we lucky to have him or what? It is a moment in our history unlike anything we have ever seen in the history of America, dude. I mean, and I'm not overstating that. It's that significant. Do you feel it when you're there?
You definitely feel a change. I mean, it is night and day from where we were, again, prior to the elections in November. And look, Republicans began planning for what it would look like well before the November elections if we were able to win the House, if we were able to win the Senate and retake the White House. And that's one of the things that we're really pushing and moving forward on is the president's agenda through the budget reconciliation process. And that's so important because, the budget reconciliation process allows us to pass legislation out of the Senate with only a 50-vote majority. Normally, legislation in the Senate, because of the filibuster rule, requires 60. We only have 53 Republicans. And so anything that we can move under the reconciliation package means that it can't be blocked by the Democratic Party. And so that is where we are focusing much of our effort. That is a very time-consuming process. But part of the reason is we're trying to put so much into this single bill. We know that we have a very limited opportunity between now and the end of this year to get major legislation passed. And so instead of trying to piecemeal it and do a little here and a little there, and then try to work with the Democrats in the Senate to make the legislation palatable so that we can get votes in the Senate, the game call has been made that we're going to put as much as possible in the reconciliation process. And so that's where we're going to be spending our time. That's where we're going to be spending our effort. But when it's complete, we're going to have, I think, legislation that is going to change the direction of the country.
When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Congressman Michael Guest. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Michael Guest, Congressman Michael Guest from the 3rd District. And again, he's not been on the show before. It's amazing to me that he hasn't been because he's such a terrific leader. And I think we've begun the process to have a long conversation over multiple shows before it's all said and done. We talked about one big, beautiful bill before we went to break, but I want to make sure we cover this There's so much we can talk about because you're involved in so many committees, you're leading in so many different ways. There's so many areas we could go to. But if you think about Liberation Day, the work that Donald Trump is doing with tariffs and the goal to make sure that America is treated fairly and that ultimately we get as much manufacturing back in the United States as we possibly can. Well, let me first just say, what does Liberation Day mean to you? And then we'll get to what it means to Mississippi next.
I think what the president's trying to do is he wants to create a level playing field. He wants to make sure that American businesses can compete across the globe because we're not being unfairly hindered by tariffs imposed by other countries to keep our products out. while at the same time we're allowing their products to flow into our country tariff-free. And so the president wants to level the playing field, because he believes that businesses in Mississippi, businesses across America, they can compete anywhere on the face of the earth, as long as the trade policy is neutral and is fair to both countries. And so the president is looking and imposing tariffs, reciprocal tariffs on countries that are imposing tariffs on American goods. And he's also wanting to make sure that we're returning those manufacturing jobs to the United States, something that you just mentioned, that we're no longer being dependent on countries across the globe, particularly countries who may not have America's best interests at heart for some of our items that are we considered more of national security issues. I think of pharmaceuticals, and we saw how important that it was in the COVID outbreak that we be able to manufacture those here. Raw materials, steel, aluminum, those things that are crucial for our industrial base, that we manufacture those items here. So the president is trying to return to an America First policy.
How did we ever get to a place, I say this more rhetorically than anything, where globalists would tell us it's a good thing for the heartland of America to be wallered out? I don't think in some respects, we were asleep at the wheel. Over 90,000 jobs left America. And look, a lot has changed in manufacturing. We've got advanced manufacturing. You've got the advent of artificial intelligence, like we mentioned. The jobs that come back are not going to be the same jobs that left. But if you look in places like the Golden Triangle, again, Madison with the data center, the kind of jobs that are being created aren't $30,000, $40,000 a year jobs, or $100,000 a year jobs. If you were to be able to bring advanced manufacturing, some of that, our share, back to Mississippi, whether it's here on the coast or wherever in Mississippi, that's going to continue what Tate Reeves and Bill Cork has been working so hard to do, and that is raise the economic ties for Mississippi. So there are a lot of problems can be solved when we're doing well, but there's a tremendous opportunity for Mississippi in this, isn't there?
You're exactly right. And look, you mentioned the governor. The governor has done an amazing job having industries that will not only look at Mississippi, but invest in Mississippi. If you would have told me, even just a couple years ago, that Amazon Web Services, that the Compass data centers, that they were each going to be investing $10 billion plus, because they announced the $10 billion investment in both Madison and Meridian. But I am told that the possibilities that some of those, at least one of those projects, could be at least double that. And I'll tell you, Ricky, that I have the opportunity to meet with people who are seriously consider bringing additional high-paying jobs into Mississippi. Again, whether it be the metro area down the coast, the Pine Belt, North Mississippi. I kind of take the approach, and I think the rest of the delegation does as well. What's good for one part of the state is good for the state as a whole. And we want to encourage growth across the state. And the fact that we have two major automobile manufacturers in Mississippi, two major tire manufacturers in Mississippi, the Golden Triangle and the growth that we've seen up there with the aluminum plant, the data centers, we know how important the shipbuilding industry is to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Those are things that we should be proud of, and things that I think that we can build upon.
I am confident. I mean, just last week we mentioned an over $900 million contract for Bollinger Shipyards. We know the tremendous commitment that has been made with Ingalls. There's just so much opportunity. I often refer to Stennis Space Center as kind of out of sight, out of mind, but what they're doing is incredibly important. And you're talking about between direct and indirect jobs, around nearly 10,000 people are impacted by what happens there at this place that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. The opportunities for the state, I think the opportunities for coastal Mississippi to continue to think about diversification and advanced manufacturing and, raising the bar, which raising the bar to me means increasing salaries, increasing the number of jobs, and really helping the economic future of all families. Listen, Congressman, we're out of time, but it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you.
Well, thank you for having me. We'd love to come back on and talk to you again. I appreciate you letting me join your show.
Yeah, it's been, listen, there's a lot of ground to cover, and we will definitely have Congressman Michael Guest back from the 3rd District of Mississippi again. Probably in the near future if he'll have us. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, thanks for your leadership. Listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.